What happened to Scuderia Ferrari in the 2024 Formula One Emilia Romagna Grand Prix? The Maranello team struggled in the first sector of the Imola racetrack, showing less performance compared to rivals Red Bull and McLaren in both the qualifying session and the race on Sunday afternoon. The Maranello team struggled in the first sector of the Imola racetrack, showing less performance compared to rivals Red Bull and McLaren in both the qualifying session and the race on Sunday afternoon. Initially, it seemed that the problem stemmed from the preparation lap and the warm-up strategy, but both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz emphasized that the difficulties at Imola might have arisen from an inadequate hybrid strategy in the section of the track where maximum power is needed. The key factor in Ferrari's weekend at Imola was its performance in the first part of the track. The SF-24 suffered in qualifying and a gap of 3 to 4 tenths emerged compared to the main rivals, which was also confirmed in the race. Initially, it seemed that the problem stemmed from the preparation lap and the warm-up strategy, but both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz emphasized that the difficulties at Imola might have arisen from an inadequate hybrid strategy in the section of the track where maximum power is needed. The key factor in Ferrari's weekend at Imola was its performance in the first part of the track. The SF-24 suffered in qualifying, and a gap of 3 to 4 tenths emerged compared to the main rivals, which was also confirmed in the race. After the qualifying session on Saturday, Charles Leclerc focused on the tires, pointing out that Ferrari does not understand what they were missing in turns 2 and 3, or more generally in the first sector. Tire preparation is important, but there was something strange, as explained by the Monegasque driver, who confirmed the Italian side tried many different things, but the same issue always comes up. Before the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix weekend, it was mentioned that the Imola track was not ideal for showcasing the new aerodynamic update package. However, after 63 laps, doubts about the setup, the inability to attack the curbs as aggressively as Max Verstappen and the two McLaren drivers, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, with a less compliant suspension than the competition, raised the question of whether the SF-24 car was using enough battery in the first sector. After the race, Charles Leclerc observed that Red Bull and McLaren seemed to employ a peculiar engine strategy that caused Ferrari to lose time to them on the straights. Despite this, Ferrari's performance in the corners was comparable, if not superior, to their rivals. He emphasized the need to analyze this aspect further and expressed confidence that addressing this issue would make Ferrari more competitive in races. The Monegasque driver also highlighted the importance of improving their qualifying performance, noting that the problems encountered in qualifying had become quite clear to the team. The distribution of electric energy can be adjusted track by track based on the circuit's layout and characteristics. The concern is that the hybrid system wasn't optimized for better performance in the first fast section of the track, costing them compared to Honda and Mercedes. The combination of setup and hybrid issues may have created a gap at Imola that was more significant than expected. Ferrari must maintain their momentum, as even in a negative weekend, they placed Charles Leclerc on the third step of the podium, securing second place in the Drivers' Championship ahead of Red Bull's Sergio Perez. The new look of the SF-24 did not make the leap of performance needed to challenge Red Bull and McLaren, but when the deficit is just over a tenth per lap, it is hard to think something is fundamentally wrong. Compared to the gap at the start of the 2024 Formula One Championship, the difference has significantly reduced, and we now have a close battle between McLaren, Red Bull, and the Maranello team for the podium. Scuderia Ferrari needs to keep pushing to close the small gap to the two cars currently ahead. The Imola weekend in Italy does not give a definitive verdict but opens a path of hope for Ferrari fans. Perhaps more will be seen in Monaco next weekend. Looking back at the race in Italy, the Imola weekend was highly anticipated because it showcased the top 3 team standings after the first major round of updates, which involved the Suzuka and Emilia Romagna races for Red Bull, the Miami Grand Prix for McLaren, and the first Italian event for Ferrari. It resulted in a great weekend with motorsport enthusiasts witnessing the top 3 cars separated by just a tenth of a second in both qualifying and the race. While Ferrari had some regrets, McLaren was euphoric at the end of a race where Lando Norris finished less than a second behind the winner Max Verstappen. It was an important race because McLaren confirmed what we saw in Miami on a very different track, as confirmed by team principal Andrea Stella at the end of the race. Ferrari's long-awaited upgrade package made its debut at Imola, and there were improvements, even if hidden by a final result similar to that of the previous weekends. After Lando Norris's first Formula One career and season victory on the American circuit 2 weeks ago, McLaren needed to prove that the substantial updates introduced in the previous race had indeed propelled the MCL-38 forward. This was a critical test for the team, particularly in a weekend where Ferrari seemed to have the fastest car at one point, and Max Verstappen bounced back after a difficult Friday to secure pole position. When the differences between the top cars are so minimal, the details and execution throughout the race weekend become extremely crucial. This includes not just the pivotal Saturday qualifying session, but also the race itself. The narrow operational window of the tires played a significant role, creating various competitive scenarios based on the combination of the driver, car characteristics, and tire management. McLaren demonstrated that their car was fully competitive with Red Bull, which had been struggling since Friday practice. In the race, tire management was a key factor, as has often been the case this season, highlighting the main differences between the top three teams. Max Verstappen initially seemed to have full control, maintaining an average gap of 2.3 per lap over Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc. The Red Bull RB20 car performed very well on the Pirelli medium tires, especially in areas where it had shown weakness during Friday's free practice sessions, such as the second sector. However, the MCL-38 single-seater experienced rear overheating problems that had plagued it earlier in the Formula One Championship and reappeared at the end of the first stint. The narrow temperature window for optimal tire performance was a limiting factor, and overheating led to significant performance drops, including for Ferrari. Lando Norris has significantly improved in race vision and management, which was evident in the Imola Grand Prix. He expertly managed the introduction and first part of the stint on hard tires, aided by a questionable Ferrari strategy that allowed him to avoid pushing hard in the early stages of the second stint when the tires were more prone to overheating. As the tires wore down, they lost both thickness and temperature, stabilizing performance. Lando Norris's careful management prevented overheating at the start of the stint, a strategy that paid off later in the race. In contrast, Max Verstappen's Red Bull started to lose temperature in the front tires, leading to understeer, while Lando Norris could push without overheating issues. Charles Leclerc's error at the Gresini chicane caused a loss of tire temperature, which he couldn't recover. Despite the SF-24 2.0 being the most consistent on tires without overheating or underheating, the Monegasque's starting position, combined with a suboptimal strategy and his mistake, prevented him from finishing much closer to Max Verstappen and Lando Norris in the Formula One Emilia Romagna Grand Prix.